Marilyn Monroe brought about a negative change in what the ideal woman was considered among Americans. Her influence was unfavorable for women as well as for men's perception of them.
Before Marilyn, there was the Gibson Girl, a set of illustrations drawn by a man named Charles Dana Gibson of women in the late 19th century and the early 20th. She wore her hair pinned up, her dresses long, and kept her slender figure significantly curvy through corseting. Besides the emphasis on a sophisticated appearance, however, Gibson girls were intelligent and independent. This look was all the rage leading up until the 1920s, when flapper girls made their entrance. Flappers were almost the opposite of the Gibson girl, and their slim, boyish figures and scandalously short dresses were their way of rejecting the image that all girls used to strive for. This particularly stylish way of rebellion was cut short when World War II came along, and American women were plunged into the world of workforce that men had to abandon while they were off fighting, left with the duty to work as if they were their husbands in order to maintain their family's wealth. Fashion was minimal, and women were even given instruction on how to fashion old suits into dresses. And then, out of the decade of fear and unspeakable horrors, came a new era, with Marilyn Monroe at the front. Norma Jean Baker, better known by her screen name, Marilyn Monroe, was born to an absent father and an uninvolved mother in Los Angeles, California. She lived her teenage years in and out of foster homes until she wedded her boyfriend at the age of 16. It was her only way to escape the foster system, where she had been harmed and abused so many times. The rough patch didn't end when she was discovered by a photographer and began her descent into the world of fame, however. There is no doubt that before Marilyn Monroe, women were not respected universally by men, but she certainly did have a negative impact on men's perception of females. It would be unfair to pin all the blame of misogyny in the 20th century on her. She did the best she could to be seen as equal or even as better than a man, but in doing so, she pushed other women down. Women who didn't wear makeup during Monroe's decade of fame, whose bodies weren't curvy and whose clothes weren't form-fitting, were suddenly being scorned. Monroe's work for her and other women's freedom of sexual expression found females who had previously been praised for keeping covered up being seen as boring and unsexy. A body is meant to be seen, not covered up, Marilyn said, and people listened to her like she was a god. As for the ones who weren't keeping covered up, following the example of their generation's most iconic figure, they were being viewed as less of women and more of objects. Monroe herself even acknowledged this when she said famously, "A sex symbol becomes a thing. I just hate to be a thing," in regards to her indisputable reputation as a sex symbol. In an interview in the 1950s, she said, "Even if that adage, 'it's a man's world,' was true, what do you care so long as you're a woman who's sought after?" Not only was she endorsing the idea of a world in which men were and would remain in power, but she was also saying that she didn't mind it, and it didn't matter to her so long as the attention of men still remained on her. This quote and the entire rest of the interview was degrading to herself and other women. "It's not that I like women less, it's that I like men more. I think all girls feel this way," she boldly proclaimed, leading men to believe that all women are fixated with them, that all girls prefer male company to that of other women. Many women of the 1950s weren't all that fond of Monroe, be it because of her impossible-to-meet standards she set or the change she brought about in American men, and in that, the television industry. Of her fame, Monroe said, "My popularity seems to be almost entirely a masculine phenomenon." Seeing the renown and impact that Monroe was granted just by showing off her body, other stars began to follow in her lead, such as Jane Mansfield and Diana Dors, both of whom were blonde and had no problem with dressing down for the camera. Also notably, the two women had affairs with other men on more than one occasion while in relationships, just like Marilyn Monroe. Along with influencing the stars of her time, Monroe's legacy continues to impact famous women of the present century. Lindsay Lohan, Lady Gaga, Kim Kardashian, and Lana Del Rey are just some of the modern stars that her memory has influenced. And it's not just changing their hair up or wearing more revealing outfits for photo shoots. These stars have channeled their inner Marilyn and recreated her entire look down to a T. Madonna, a pop singer from the 1980s, and Lana Del Rey, a modern alternative musician, have both dressed as her for music videos. For Del Rey's video National Anthem, she wears an elegant white dress in the style of Monroe and sings the older woman's famous Happy Birthday, Mr. President, a remake of her birthday wish to John F. Kennedy from when the two were allegedly involved in an affair in 1962. It's a great thing to remember and pay homage to the dead,
but it's another to let their poor choices in life influence you even after their death. Monroe certainly exchanged traditional beauty standards for her own, the ones that turn women into boy-crazy objects. Lana Del Rey, who has mentioned on many occasions that Monroe is one of her biggest idols, has written many songs mentioning the woman and claiming she wants to be like her. In her song Puppy Love, she is singing to a man and says he makes her want to live in the 1950s, tending to his needs, making him breakfast in bed, and dressing up for him.
You make me wanna be like one of those girls from the 1950s, wearing those big pearls. I'll cook you breakfast, coffee on your desk, yeah. You're everybody's hero and you're hitting it home while I'm singing for the soldiers like Marilyn Monroe. And if I call you on the telephone, I might overdose, 'cause I'm strong but I'm lonely like Marilyn Monroe.
Also like her idol, she doesn't seem too interested in defending the rights of women. In an interview, she says, "For me, the issue of feminism is just not an interesting concept. I'm more interested in, SpaceX and Tesla. What's going to happen with our intergalactic possibilities? Whenever people bring up feminism, my God, I'm just not that interested." As well as that, she seems to think that early death, which relates directly to Monroe's overdose at 37, is glamorous. When asked by an interviewer, "Is early death glamorous?" she responded first with an "I don't know," followed by an affirmation. The interviewer, obviously concerned by the answer, told her not to say that, to which she replied with, "I do. I don't want to keep having to do this, but I am." So it would appear the young singer looks up to those who die early, her adulation of late singer Kurt Cobain following this pattern. Obviously, her apparent death wish can't be entirely blamed on Monroe, but her glorification of early death and of the Paragon women can be no coincidence. Anna Nicole Smith, another famous fan, aspired to be the next Marilyn Monroe and said so openly. Both women earned their fame due to their shapely figures, modeling talent, and appeal to men, and both were famous blonde models turned actresses. No similarities between the two, however, are as haunting as that of their deaths. Both died of supposedly accidental overdoses on prescription pills for insomnia and anxiety, among other drugs. While it cannot be directly proven that Monroe had anything to do with the suicide, Smith did predict in an earlier interview that she believed she was going to die young, at 37, which was the age Marilyn Monroe was when she killed herself. There is no doubt that Marilyn Monroe is an icon. Her body and lasting legacy have inspired countless pieces of art, music, and people. Her influence is not all bad, but a notable amount has been. She's impacted the self-esteem of the young, the old, the middle-aged, men and women, singer and student alike. Hearing of Miss Monroe being found in the nude on her childhood bed, a phone on her hand, and empty bottles of pills sprawled across the floor even inspired some fanatics to follow her suit and die in her glamorous way. She spoke to empower women and then turned right back around and made them into objects. "A woman can't be alone. She needs a man," she said. Marilyn Monroe has a memory and an impact that still lasts today, inspiring people to make art, diet, and kill themselves. Although she has gone down in history as an icon for women of all ages, there is no doubt that her influence on them remains unpleasant.